The Academy is one of the most loved parts of career mode, but also one of the most secretive. We don't really know where the best place to scout is, we don't know if there's a difference between nations, we don't know if certain roles produce tall players, and we don't really know how age affects stats generation. Or do we? Because I've been running a script for over a week that generates 24 youth players per minute, it logs their names, potentials, overalls, and so much more, and I can figure out answers to everything we want to know. Today I'm sharing that information with you in the most straightforward way that I can, and I think there's some really cool information in this video, so stick around to the end of the video where I'll be telling you exactly where you should be scouting if you want the absolute best youth players. Okay, so let's start with a pretty easy to answer question. Does the age of youth even matter? You'd think that 13-year-olds would probably generate at a lower overall than 16-year-olds. With 3 years extra to grow, they might end up slightly better than a 16-year-old, but it should be pretty similar, right? Well, let's have a look, because I've got a total of 6,000 youth player screenshots, so we can get a pretty good idea about what youth generation is like. I might extend this to over 100,000 one day, so subscribe if you want even better data, but here's what we have. Okay, so what we have right here is every single player, and this is their overall rating, and this is their age. So you can see 13-year-olds had a pretty narrow band between 45 and 60, whereas 17-year-olds could appear between 55 overall and 72. Now it seems like this is maybe a little bit of data missing. For example, I didn't get a single 67 rated 15-year-old, but that is probably possible because we got a 68 rated 15-year-old. To be honest, the most likely player that you're going to get is a 15-year-old who's rated either 57 or 58. And that's pretty fair enough. I'd say that's probably about where most real players are. Although you do see a lot of 17-year-olds that are rated higher than this in the game, so maybe EA should boost this to maybe be 73 or 74 overall, and if you've seen someone over the rating of 72 in your academy, then you are a very, very lucky person. Okay, but what about potential? This one should be fairly straightforward, because a 13-year-old should probably have the same natural potential as a 16-year-old. Both are still a decade away from their peak, so there's plenty of time for them to grow, and is this going to be as expected? Okay, so yet again we have the same kind of table. We've got potential along the top, and then we have the age along the side. So you can see here we had one player who was 13 with 51 potential, and we had one player who was 60 potential when they were 17. Okay, so we've readjusted the table, and here we have the average overall and the average potential for every single age. You can see that the average overall goes up by 8 over the 4 or 5 year difference, and for the potential it only goes up by 2. There's still a difference between older players having higher overall and higher potential, and that means that it's actually better to probably find players who are 16 and 15 than 13 and 14. If we change the table over to this, in fact the highest overall player we found who was 13 years old was 60 overall with 88 potential. But this 60 overall is pretty bad, because if we add 14-year-olds into here, then the average overall goes up by an absolute ton. So you can see that all of a sudden we have a ton of 63, 62, 61s, and even a bunch more 60s. They're very common in 14-year-olds, but there's just that one 13-year-old who is at this level. It makes it almost pointless to sign a 13-year-old. You're not going to be able to use them for ages anyway. And honestly, if you want to totally min-max your academy to get as many good players through it as you can, you're going to be wanting to sign players who are 16, 17, and probably even 15. But 16 is absolutely the best age to sign a player. So let's get on to some bigger and more important pieces of information. Does it even slightly matter where you send your youth scouts? Well, to figure this out, I have the information of 1,000 Australian players and 1,000 Brazilian players. The last time we had solid information on where the best place to scout was on FIFA 16, and this was actually the best and worst nation to scout in the entire game. Okay, so from 1,000 Australians, we have the average age of 15.15 years old, we have the average potential of 70.87, and we have an average overall of 58.79. Let's compare that to Brazil, where they have an average age that's slightly younger at just over 15, they have a slightly lower potential at 70.50, and they have a slightly lower overall rating of 58.47. Surely EA haven't made a career mode game where Australia is a better place to scout than Brazil, right? Well, let's also split this up into positions, because in the past, Australia was really good at wingers, and maybe that's still boosting it today. Well, if we look into the data, you can see that is kind of the case, but it's more that Brazil is awful at everything. Okay, so this is the Australian players and this is the Brazilian players. It's pretty easy to follow, hopefully. This is the position, this is their average potential, and this is their average overall. And we can actually see Australia is miles better. On average, they're almost 1 overall better, and on potential, they're almost 1 overall better, which is so strange because Australia really should not be better than Brazil in a football game. What's even weirder is that the overall rating of left wingers in Australia is much lower. You can see this is over half a point lower, but the potential is nearly an entire point higher. So I don't know what it is about Australia that makes their players actually better than Brazilians, but for some reason, that is happening in the academy on FC25. Okay, well, let's see if it isn't actually nationality, but it's actually continent that matters, and let's compare the 1,000 Brazilians to 1,000 players from Trinidad and Tobago. They also count as South American, and let's be honest, their players should be nowhere near as good as Brazil. I mean, compare Kenwyne Jones to Vinicius Jr. It's not even a competition. Okay, so as I mentioned before, let's compare Brazil and Trinidad. So you would expect, because they're in the same region, they would have very similar stats, and for some reason, they actually do. Their average potential, Brazil is slightly higher, 0.12 average, and on overall, it's actually Trinidad that's producing higher overall players, 58.5 versus 58.15, and this is coming from over 2,000 players, so this isn't just one-off results making things absolutely weird. You can see that some of the best Trinidad players are left wingers, and if we look a little bit deeper into it, you can see we actually got a 98 rated player, we got some 95s, and a lot of the players sort of bringing the average down. So there is a difference between Brazil and Trinidad, but arguably Trinidad and Tobago is a better youth scouting nation than them. In fact, why don't we extend this to all of the nations? We have 2,000 players from France, 1,000 from England, 1,000 from Australia, 1,000 from Brazil, and 1,000 from Trinidad. Let's have a look and see if Brazil is still the worst nation, or if England and France are actually better than Australia and Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, this one takes a little bit more explaining. So you can see right here, this is the nation, and this is the position of the players from that nation. This is the average of their potential, and this is the average of their overall. If it's green, that means it's good. If it's yellow, it means it's in the top 1% out of every single nation and every single position. So right wingers from Australia have really good overall, but the potential isn't that great. If we look at Brazil, almost none of their positions are any good. In fact, if you're scouting Brazil, left wing is the best. I don't know if this is using something like Vinicius Jr. as some kind of baseline, but if we go to England, attacking midfield, amazing. Potential on centre defensive midfielders and left backs really good as well. Right wingers are some of the best to scout from England, and centre backs also pretty good, but France is even better. If you scout any kind of winger, any kind of centre-back, any kind of attacking midfielder, you'll get a lot of potential. And centre-backs also had one of the highest overall ratings to begin with as well. So France is absolutely amazing for centre-backs. I haven't seen a single other country have a link like this, so if I do some more countries in a future video, I'll make sure to do this exact same formula and figure out where the best place is to scout every single position. I haven't quite figured out what the link is between Brazil being bad and France being good. I don't know if this was just random luck, or if France is just a better region, or if Europe is the better region. I'll do a bit more experimenting and I'll make another video where I'll explain exactly that. But before we finish the video and put everything together and I tell you what you should be doing, why don't we also have a look at name pools? These are kind of important, and this is just basically a list of names that EA would assign to every single nation. This is what stops you getting Fred Smith from Russia, and it stops your Mexican wonder kid being called Shola Amiobi. They've definitely got better this year, but how good are they? Well, let's have a look at how many different names are in each one of our nations. So here is the name pool data. Once again, we have the nations here, or at least the folder where the Steam screenshots ended up, and then we have the amount of first names and the amount of last names. So Australia has 125 first names, which is the same as England, which makes me think it's probably the exact same name pool. In the last names as well, very similar amounts between Australia and England, about 12 or 14 difference with some quick maths there, and France has also got a really nice amount of names. But it seems like the only difference they've made for smaller nations and rarer nations like Brazil is they've made sure all of them have at least 25. Trinidad has exactly 25, Brazil has 25, and when I tested this on Ukraine, it also had 25. The 25 and the 56 names in Brazil gives you 1,400 unique names, which does sound like a lot, but compare it to the Australian amount, which is near to 40,000. You're way more likely to find a duplicate in Brazil than you would be in any of these other countries. Okay, so let's finish the video off by just talking about some random facts that I found from this analysis. So, of course, we figured out that the best players are usually wingers. This is because they only really need dribbling and pace to be high rated. That also makes them really good attacking midfielders, makes them pretty decent fullbacks, and also pretty good strikers. So if you want to find the very best youth player for your next academy save, have a look around Europe and make sure you're scouting left and right wing. Left wing seems to be better than right wing in almost every country I've checked, but still left wing is the absolute pinnacle of where you can scout. France seems to be the best nation, but England's also pretty good, and I would also avoid South America almost altogether because from looking at Argentina, Chile and Uruguay with some smaller tests, they don't seem to be too different to Brazil and are also very similar to Trinidad. So South America seems to be kind of broken, and in a future video, like I've said, I'll have a look at North America, Africa and some more of the Asian countries. But that's going to come out in probably a week or 2 weeks, so subscribe if you want to see that, and thank you for watching my 10-minute video that's basically just a spreadsheet. I really do appreciate you making it this far, and thank you for watching. I hope you have a great weekend, and if you want to see me playing career mode, then check out the playlist and the video on the screen right now. But thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Cheers and goodbye.